Yeah, so I felt like it was a rough class. I don't know if y'all felt that, but no. Okay. Um, it's really hard to stay focused when there's a bunch of other things going on in the room. And I only made 3 mistakes, which I feel pretty proud of that because I was also recording it on the thing, but it just took a lot of focus to stay on the count. That's why you didn't get a bunch of adjustments. So, um, how's everyone doing? We good? Okay. So, Fridays I feel like are kind of special, not only because lead class, it's important, but it gives you an opportunity to ask questions. And it also gives you an opportunity to kind of hear a little bit of my um, things that are going on in my head. And so before we begin, does anyone have any questions with regard to the practice that they'd like me to focus on today?
I have one question, Taylor.
Yeah, shoot.
You're teaching on lead intermediate. Is
Yeah.
that for folks that even aren't working on intermediate yet?
Yeah. So, I mean, you can show up, but, so when you look at, and this is good maybe for everyone to hear, when you look at the primary series, it's not so primary. And it's really not. Like, I mean, it's kind of named wrong because it sort of implies that there's like this primary easy thing, like primary school kind of stuff. And it's not. A primary series is very difficult. What we did here even makes it more difficult in lead style. Like the thing that creates accessibility in Ashtanga yoga is really the individual teaching that you get in the Mysore room. That happens Monday or Sunday through Thursday here. And so when you do a lead style, obviously you're going to my count. So Navasana, you hold for a little bit longer. Back bends, you hold for a little bit longer. Maybe all of the stuff you hold for just a little bit longer because you're in the Mysore class, you're moving to your own breath and you have the ability to do that. And it gives sort of like this accessibility thing. But when you're in lead style, it's difficult because you're staying with me. Okay. So, if you practice intermediate series in the Mysore room, it's still difficult. And it's obviously not primary series, it's intermediate series, it's middle series. And it's really like level 7. Even when you're kind of not um, when you kind of take some extra breaths and you kind of chill out a little bit and give yourself a little bit of space to sort of explore the postures or take a few extra breaths or figure out how to do it. And that's second series in Mysore class. But if you're doing lead intermediate, it's like level 10. It's not an easy class. Now, can you show up? Yeah, you can, even if it's postures. In my opinion, it's fun. It's one of my favorite classes to teach. I haven't taught it for a really long time. We're going to do it at 6 a.m. on Sunday, sort of like a special one. Kathleen's doing a workshop, and so I'm covering it. And I didn't really think of it until just yesterday. I was like, oh, all the level 2 people are here, and so why not do a lead intermediate? Just because it will help with the count, stuff like that. And so I added it onto the schedule. So to answer your question directly, you can, but if you're going to show up to lead intermediate series, you have to show up with sort of like this mind of curiosity. And you also have to make sure that you're use a bunch of discernment because they only get more difficult than what you got going on. So if you're working the primary series, like these are much more difficult. I don't really want to shy anyone away from it, but but like you need to know that it's a very difficult class. And if you're not proficient at primary series, second series is going to be extremely difficult for you. Okay. So you can come, but you need to make sure that you take care of yourself while we're doing it. Knowing the vinyasa count is pretty important first for primary series and also for second. And but some of the postures, they demand a bunch of attention just because of the difficulty of them. Does that help answer you a little bit? Yeah. Anyone else have any questions?
question.
Yes.
So, so every time I do lead primary, I feel like it definitely pushes me a little out of my comfort zone. As you know, I take my time with entering a shape, especially when we get into like the Marichiasana portion. I feel like, and my question is when I'm practicing Mysore, should I try to come into the shape a little quicker than, so it would match that vinyasa count? Should that be a goal?
Yeah, that's a great question too. It really is. So in the Mysore session, you have the ability to give yourself space. You really do. And that's the beauty of it. And, you know, let's just say like there's a shoulder or knee thing that's bothering your hamstring, or you got a boot on, or any of this kind of stuff. You're going to have to take some extra time to get into the poses. And that is 100% acceptable. It really is, especially if it's just that you're kind of navigating, you know, and trying to figure out the pose. If you're avoiding, that's a little bit different of a story. Like, you know, if you're gazing off into the distance and watching the birds outside, like I'm going to ask you to get on like the vinyasa count. But like if you need some time to explore the posture, that's what Mysore style is. But there is going to be a certain period of time when you come into you know, to lead class, and then there's going to be a period of time to transition the vinyasa count of the lead class into your practice. There's going to be a time, and that is a little bit up to me and a little bit up to you, kind of like this two-way street thing. And usually when someone gets pretty proficient at the primary series and you're getting ready to move on to second series, like the cool thing is that you go back and you try and do these details. Like you try and get the vinyasa count, you try and stay on it, you know, because what the vinyasa count does is essentially put you on a track. And the track is designed to keep you focused the entire time so that you know when you are not on it. Okay. And that's like one of the things that makes Ashtanga yoga the most powerful, because, you know, of course, we have a little bit of play and a little bit of curiosity, and like you can take your time in the Mysore room, but you want to know when you're off track, you know, because it gives you data and information about what's happening inside. And you know, potentially there's a life situation that's happening and you're just like, I don't really want to be here, but you're kind of doing it, but you're kind of not. Like this, if you don't know the track, you wouldn't even know that you're off base, you know. And in addition to that, it creates heat, creates transformation. Anytime you create heat, it creates transformation. And it really gives us another technique that we can do as we move through the practice in order to, you know, to stay focused and go to a focused meditative state, because that's what essentially we're trying to do. And so, you know, to answer your question directly, I mean, you can have space in the Mysore room, injuries, these kind of things, but you also, there's going to be a time and place where you learn the vinyasa count. And the vinyasa count is not really learned like the first week or the first month. It's actually learned kind of as one of the last things. We teach the sequence first. And then, like, you know, as we teach you the sequence and you get familiar with it, then we come in and we give you the icing on the cake. And the icing on the cake, or the writing on the cake, the happy birthday on the cake, is that is the vinyasa count, you know. So because it's very complicated to do, like even in some of you heard me say this before, but even teaching the lead class is extremely difficult. I never get it perfect. Like it just doesn't happen. And so even, you know, the difficulty is there. I mean, it's one thing to open up your hips, but it's another one to know the entire track of exactly where you are, what you're doing, and where you're supposed to be breathing, what the number is, all these things. And so it's sort of like a higher level of learning. But it's important, you know, it's just not happened in the beginning. And I think that's okay. You know, we sort of teach it loosely, but it's not like we're trying to like, there's an inhale and there's an exhale here. It's like, it's more broad brushstrokes in the beginning for the new people. Does that help you?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. We got a question here.
It's on the Vinyasa account again.
Okay.
For primary series, most of the Vinyasa account makes sense for me.
Of course.
There's some, especially in the closing sequence,
Yeah.
that I that I pretend I follow, but I don't.
Okay.
Because it don't make sense
Okay.
to me anyway. And I wanted to know.
Yeah.
because you're like, for example, Ashtau Halasana, inhale.
Yeah.
Like I want to excel. And
Yeah.
I don't tell anyone I do.
Well,
but this is what I do.
Yeah.
Do you have an opinion on that?
So she's talking about how there's like a little bit of gray area and some of it makes sense in the vinyasa count and others of it doesn't make sense. And so this style of learning came from India. And it's not like kind of a science how you would sort of say like we view science, more like yoga science. And there is gray areas and you kind of have to know, like there's a lot of framework, but there's also a lot of like little things that you would think would be the opposite that are not. And so, yeah, I mean, to answer your question directly, it's okay what you're doing. Like it's fine, but I would also say that it's also there for a reason too.
That's my question.
Yeah.
Do you think it's there for a reason? Or it's like a little mistake that was,
Yeah,
because there is sometimes.
of course. I
Yeah.
mean, when I wrote, so I wrote 3 books with Ryan, who's not on here. He avoids lead class. And so, so I wrote these 3 books with him and we're already on like the 4th edition because I mean, they were harder to write than my memoir, folks.
Mhm.
And because there's so much detail. So like we'd send out 4 or 5 books and someone would be like, there's 1 word missing. And it's like, oh my gosh, over and over and over again. And so then we're checking it with other references and some of the references are different, So it's like, okay, at a certain point, you're like, is this the best I can do? And it's like, yes, this is the best I can do. I think a lot of times we view it as sort of like, well, this is the choreography and like this, it has to be exactly like this. And there's gray areas where it doesn't actually make sense. You have to kind of know. Yeah.
Which is what I'm using
Yeah.
my discernment. But even when I teach it,
Yeah.
I will say but I will say inhale, like I will
Yeah.
manage it so they are actually exhaling, getting it, but every time I wonder if
I will say that I've probably been in 100 of Schrott's lead classes, and in the closing sequence, he doesn't say Ashto, inhale, exhale. He doesn't say anything. He just says Ashto into Halasana. And so, I mean, there's a little bit of space there too. But the idea is that we're sort of or it's an ideal that we're striving for.
I totally get that.
Yeah.
Just don't know.
Yeah, there is little gray areas that are like going to throw you off a little bit. Even in the wide-legged forward folds, the extra exhale or the extra inhale, looking up kind of thing, it throws people off as well. It's
Yeah,
like,
but
why not
that's-
just go down and get into it?
They
You know,
make
so
sense in the end. They're part of the
Yeah.
choreography.
yeah, they're part of it. Yes.
I think this in particular comes from the full vinyasa, because I did a full vinyasa class, and in the closing, you do a transition in between shoulder stand.
Correct.
Halasana.
Yeah.
So it's really Sapta, jump full, exhale, lay down,
Yes.
Ashto, inhale,
Yeah, and 100% it's based off of the full vinyasa, which will confuse everyone in the room, but it's true. It makes sense more with that. Yeah. Anyone else? Anyone else online?
Yeah, I have one, Taylor. I noticed actually to follow up on the vinyasa count that after Marichyasana C and D,
Yep.
you don't do like the pause where you look forward, inhale, exhale, and then lift up.
Yeah, so there is none there.
Okay.
There is not there when I first started, I thought there was like a, inhale, look forward or something like that, and then exhale, cross. It's the thing about the vinyasa count, and this, just put this in your head because you'll refer to it back later, is that really more difficult poses like C and D or Kapotasana or Dvipada or Ekapada, like these poses, the vinyasa count is actually harder to get into. And I think part of the reason, and maybe this is just my opinion or idea around it, is that more difficult poses need less space, because as soon as your mind enters into sort of this equation of the posture, what happens is you can essentially talk yourself out of doing it, Okay. And so when the difficulty of the posture comes, like a Marichasana C, it's like jump through, bind your hands like immediately. And no one wants to do that because like you want some extra space and all this kind of stuff. But I mean, it'd be really easy to talk yourself out of it because you already ate breakfast or you're full or like, you know, bloated or what, to not do C or any of these more difficult poses. And so to answer your question, like, yeah, difficult poses have more difficult vinyasa counts that are attached to them. Yeah. Anyone else? So the thing that's sort of been driving home with me is that, you know, anytime that there's, you know, huge life changes, you know, because, you know, change is difficulty, you know, or at least what I've been kind of paying attention to is that it requires more practice. It doesn't require less. You know, it requires more intensity. It requires more of me because the practice ends up making us feel differently. For me, it makes me feel better, makes me feel more comfortable in my own skin. It helps me deal with anxiety and depression and all of these things that come up as just being a human. And so like, and when that life stuff happens, I think the important things to do is to go back to the fundamentals, you know, and to go back and say like, okay, where am I doing this stuff right? The vinyasa count is part of those fundamentals, of course. But if you're not there yet, there's other ones. You know, the main points of focus are really breath, bandhas, drishti, paying attention to poses. That's what it are. That's what they are. And so when we go through the practice and you're feeling like life is getting hard, or there's some sort of thing that's coming up and you're feeling like a little weird about it, the fact of the matter is that you go back to the fundamentals. And in athletics, if you were like a sports person or whatever, like LeBron's having trouble shooting free throws, or you know, Messi's having trouble dribbling or something like that, he's just like feeling a little off or something like this, they go back to the fundamentals. They work with their coach. They go back to the fundamentals. Well, the fundamentals of Ashtanga yoga, obviously different than athletics. And we go back to breath. You know, so many times during the practice, I didn't hear you guys' breath. And like what we're trying to do is breathe with sound. And that's like a little restriction in the throat. It's happening through the nose. And everyone should essentially, I should be able to hear everyone's breath. Not that it needs to be super intense. It just needs to be audible because you're paying attention to it, because your ears are like trying to capture the sound of the breath so that you can remain focused as we do it. You know, so there needs to be this focus and attention onto breath. And, you know, you can't do difficult poses without actually having it be connected to the breath. It doesn't serve any purpose. You'll look like a tomato. You won't want to do it because it's going to like stimulate your nervous system even more as you do difficult things or even easy things. Lifting up and jumping back and holding your breath. Like we have to go back to the fundamentals. And this is for me, and this is for everyone on Zoom and in person. It's like you go back to the breath, you start focusing on the breath, and you pay attention to it the entire time. And it's extremely difficult. It's going to be hard for you to do, but you do it anyways because it's worth it. Okay. Because it has value. Now, even paying attention to the breath will bring up emotions and bring up feelings and bring up all these things. And we have to be brave enough to have that stuff boil up and continue to move forward. That's what life is asking of us. You know, like life is hard, folks. It really is. And there's a lot of difficult things going on. And so like breathing and feeling your emotions, having like sort of a somatic experience with your breath and paying attention to it. That's what we're trying to do. Like we're trying to do it. We're trying to breathe like Ujjayi breath. It's not as forced as like traditional Ujjayi breath, but it's free breathing with sound. So you should be able to hear it. Okay, mouth closed. A lot of gasping going on today from certain people. And we want to keep our mouth closed and we want to breathe in and out of the nose. Okay. And if you breathe right, then one of the other pillars and sort of this foundational tool is that we find bandhas. And bandhas is like, you know, it's a huge topic. I'm not going to be able to talk about it enough. I do workshops of just bandhas. Just because like they're really complicated to explain. But if you're not going to breathe properly, you're not going to find bandhas, folks. It has to be full inhales. It has to be full exhales. And And different poses require different levels of bandhas. And part of this bandha conversation is sort of understanding the breath and staying focused and getting coordinated enough to, connect the breath with the movement and all these things. And what happens is you start stimulating the pelvic floor and also right below the navel, which is giving you sort of like this ability to or potentially float around. Okay. And if you see someone really capture this, the practice looks light and it looks like it's sort of like flowing. And a person who's just like pushing through, they're just missing this sort of lightness. And I always think that it's a really good thing to point out, like really good ballet dancers. We're at the studio right now. It's like there's a bar here. But like there's very good ballet dancers or ballroom dancers. It looks like they glide across the floor. And that's essentially what we're trying to do. And that has to be connected to the breath. And in order for us to find the bandhas, because it creates this lightness and creates this movement that essentially looks flowing instead of like forced, if you know what I mean. And I'm really good at the forced thing. I get an A+ in the force. I get like a D in bandhas, but when I find them, the important thing is that it feels better as I'm doing it. And one of the pro tips that I can give you for bandhas is that every single time that you're doing a posture, the lower belly, the lower abdominals, we're isolating the lower abdominals from hip point to pubic bone. And what you're trying to do is slightly pull that in. And it's maintained the entire time. It has like a slight integrity and tension in it the entire time we practice. Now, if you're going to do something more difficult, then you probably need more pelvic floor activation. You might pull it in a little bit more difficult. But if you're going to do, or a little bit more, if you're going to do something like Janu A or Marichasana A or something like this, you might not need a lot here. But if you're going to jump around your arms in Bhuja Padasana and put your face on the ground, then come out of it in Bakasana, like I asked you to do today, it's going to be like required of you that you have more attention of what's going on down here. Bandhas is sort of like this. There's three of them, one in the throat, one at the belly button, one in the pelvic floor. And our intention is to gather information and have our mind's eye pay attention to that area. There are so many nerve endings here. There's more than fingers, more than our lips. In our gut, there's more nerve endings down here. There is a lot of information that is down here. And this is where our gut feeling comes from. It gives us information that we don't even know where it came from. You have this sense of like, I'm not supposed to be here, or something's off, or something like that. That's the gut feeling. And that's where your bandhas are. In addition to that, the other things that need to be paid attention to, it's, great for early morning practice because you typically don't eat before your practice because it'd be very difficult for you to find bandhas. Could you practice if you eat? Yes, you could. Is it going to be more difficult to find lightness? Yes, it will be very difficult to find lightness because it's sort of, it's a little tied up down here or congested. Okay. And so you want to drink a coffee or drink hot water or whatever you do for your morning routine and go to the bathroom and then start your practice. You can eat afterwards because that's what's going to get us like a little bit clearer down here in this gut so we can start paying attention to what's happening down here. Okay. And so bandhas are also sort of this contraction. There's this muscle that's goes between your pubic bone and your tailbone. And essentially what you're trying to do is it's called the pubiocoxal muscle, which runs this way in the body. And we're essentially trying to like pull it upward. And bandhas are really trying to pull up energy so that they don't go down and out, because down and out is heavy. Okay. Does that make sense or no? Yeah. So, I mean, just to summarize it, just pull in your lower belly, folks. Just like a slight paying attention, pulling in your lower belly and just doing as best of breaths as you possibly can. That's the simple, easy. That gives you at least a potential to find them. Okay. We got this. The last one, well, I mean, I probably won't talk about asana, but the last one, drishti. And out of all of the ones that I just described, the hardest one to actually do is the drishti, for a couple different reasons. Your eyes take in terabytes of information, like terabytes of information, so much that your mind has to forget the information because it doesn't have enough storage for it. And this is scientifically proven. You can actually do it. So the eyes are taking in so much information. In addition to all of the information that's being gathered, there's also like this parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, which keeps us sort of like in the survival mode. And during our postures, the thing that happens is you stimulate those things, fight or flight, essentially. Okay. And we're doing this difficult posture. We're focused on the breath. Our breath maybe gets a little bit rattled. We're doing this difficult thing. And what happens is that you will start looking around the room because you're in basically like survival mode. And I'm serious. And sometimes it happens just a little bit. And sometimes you'll see people like bust out of the room and they have to like get out because like they're going to fight me or something like this. Not like physically, but there's sort of like this thing that happens where it's like the intensity is so high. And our job is to notice that and to stay in it, because like it's building sort of this toning of the nervous system as we do this stuff. So we take this this opportunity of when we're sort of like stimulated, or maybe you wouldn't say triggered, and you kind of stay in it as we do in the posture. And that's why the vinyasa count, the breath, and all this stuff is really important. You're putting all of these layers so that you can sort of remain safe and present and focused as we do this stuff. And then the eyes have a tendency when we're stimulated to look all around the room. Like it is normal for you to look around the room. It's like, this is also scientifically proven. You put food down in front of all of us, or any of us, you put food down in front of us and you will look around the room and scan the horizon to make sure no one steals your food. And probably no one's going to steal your food today, but this is the oldest part of the brain, when like there were predators that were coming after the food that you got. And so someone puts food down and you're like, I'm scanning around because I want to make sure that I can eat. I want to also make sure that I'm safe. We do this. You do it. You don't even know that you do it. And the reason why I point that out is because when you're stimulated, you're going to look at your neighbor. You're going to want to talk to them. You're going to want to, like commiserate with them. You're going to want to do that. But our job is to know where your eyes are supposed to look. And the pro tip is just don't look around the room. Keep your eyes on your own mat, kind of thing. Down the tip of the nose. If you don't know what the drishti is, you can ask me. But the default gaze is that you look down the tip of the nose and you just pay attention to what you are doing. It doesn't matter if someone has a bright, fancy new mat, or someone shows up late. Your job during this hour and a half is to take care of you. And all of this stuff is like getting us to a place where we can remain strong, even though that life throws difficult things at us, because these lessons that are being learned here, you take them out into the world. And it's one of the, it's one of the reasons why this is so good. I mean, I know I talk a lot about it, but it's so good for people in addiction, because people in addiction are constantly at fight or flight, and you're not always at fight or flight. But they're like people who are in addiction, like it's easily triggered from traumas, and also easily triggered with difficult postures, or not feeling good enough as they're not able to bind, and these kind of things like get brought up on your mat. And so our job is to understand that, feel it all, remain focused, not look off of the mat, and continue to breathe, continue to pull in our lower belly, and go back to all of the fundamentals while these postures and everything else that's at play is going on. And this is not an easy task. Like, this is a hard task, but it's valuable. And I think the real thing that I want to stress is that, if you're feeling off track or life is hard for you, like all of the things that I mentioned just require a little bit of investment from you. Like, you just have to be like, hey, that's important. And then I'm going to do that. And it can just start with one of them. I'm going to pull in my lower belly, or I'm going to remain focused the entire time. I'm not going to go to the bathroom 4 times a practice, and because those are places where you're avoiding, the difficulty of the practice. And our job is to stay in it, to to stay in it, because as we move through the practice and it brings things up, it will be released if you allow it to be released, whatever it is, a trauma or a trigger or whatever's going on in your practice. Does any of that make sense? Yeah. And so, and if all of this stuff is doing that, okay, it is more reason to practice than to not practice, because it means that it's working, folks. Like, this is the whole power of the practice. Like, I mean, I would like to say there's, it's true. There's been periods of practice where it felt like sort of an upheaval. And there's been a period of my practice life that it felt like I was making a lot of progress. And then there was periods where it was sort of like I was putting myself back together. And then there was also ones that I was dealing with something deep that I didn't even know the words for it. I didn't even actually know what it was, you know? And all of that is an opportunity to sit there and go like, you know, this practice is working. Because at the end of the day, what you have to ask yourself, like the fundamental question that you have to ask yourself about the practice is this helping me heal? And if you can say that, hey, it's helping me heal, or on whatever level, physical, mental, emotional, any personal work that you got to do, then it's more of a reason to practice. And at the end of the day, and if you say to yourself like, hey, this isn't working for me, or those kind of things, then it would be perfectly acceptable for you to say like, I'm going to go try something else. Like, perfectly acceptable. But in my 20 years of experience of practicing on a daily basis, there's never been anything else that I've found that has given me what I have here. Like, I can't find it anywhere else. If anyone has any ideas where I could find it, I'm happy to take them. But there's never been a tool that I've been given that I've been so grateful for, because it allows me to continue to evolve as a human. It really does. I get met with my insecurities, their lack of confidence and self-esteem, and how how I can make the world better, and all of these stuff. I don't find that anywhere else. And when I don't practice, like when I take days, like multiple days off, I'm allowed to have a day, but when I take multiple days off, like, I'm not the same. You guys every single day get the best version of Taylor. You really do. Because what's required of the teacher is that I show up here and I practice and I do the work that you guys are doing too. Like, that's what's required. And every single day you meet me directly after the moment of me doing the work, and allows me to be of open service to you. And that's like a really powerful thing. It really is. I mean, and to be completely honest with you too, it's the great work of my life to be able to show up here. Like, I don't want to practice at 3 o'clock in the morning anymore, but by showing up here at 4 a.m. or a little bit before, it gives me the opportunity to be the best teacher, human, dad, whatever it is, that I can possibly be. And I don't know where else I would get that. There's never a point in time where I'm like, yeah, this gives me the same thing as yoga, Yeah. But when you're feeling off track and getting back to the fundamentals, so that maybe potentially you can realize that stuff again, it's pretty powerful. Okay. Does this make sense for everyone? Yeah. So, anyone have any last questions before we get out of here? Yes.
I've had like students come to me before and they're just like exhausted.
Yeah.
They show up to their mat, they're showing up
Mhm.
consistently, and they're battling, whether it's internal. I always ask them to do the collection of their life, but what's
Yeah.
your advice for the people who are really disciplined? They're showing up consistently.
Yeah, they're just the people. So the question from Kimber is that, like, what do you do when the student shows up and they're really exhausted? Well, when you're going through difficult periods of time, sometimes less is more. And so doing something, and something like for me means sun salutation, standing, maybe finishing poses or back bends and finishing, something like that. But that's one of the things that you have to, even though that life is hard, we still have to continue to work. Even though that we're tired, we have to continue to work. It's the same thing as like if you start a business or you or you work for someone, like if you show up tired, what has to happen? You still do it. You still do it. You know, like me owning a business, like I still have to do the work. I have to do the admin work, the QuickBooks. And it's okay for me to sort of pull back and take care of myself for a period of time. And I can help the student navigate that. But at the end of the day, the work has to continue. And this is discipline, folks. Like this is really hard. And as yoga teachers, it's very difficult for us to, you know, when we know the student's story and we know that they're going through a difficult time, to not give them a bunch of space to do whatever they want. And really the most compassionate thing from my viewpoint is to ask them to do not all of the work, but to do enough work that it ends up still taking care of themselves. Yeah. And that's a really hard thing to navigate, you know, because it seems a little like this person's going through a difficult time. I need to give them a break kind of stuff. And I do, but I mean, for the most part, I'm asking you guys to do the work on a daily basis. That's what we do. Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Thank you all for being here. Lead Intermediate is at 6 a.m. on Sunday for all those brave souls. All right. Love you all. Thank you for being here today.
Bye, Taylor. Have a good day.
Bye.